Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Aneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Armenia has imposed nationwide martial law and has announced a total militarization amid fresh row with Azerbaijan. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced the measures after an encounter with Azeri forces in the Nagorno-Karabakh region this morning. Both countries are blaming each other for the aggression. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev has vowed to avenge the killing of Azerbaijani soldiers. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has warned against setting hasty timelines for the intra-Afghan talks and a hurried international withdrawal from Afghanistan. In his article published in the Washington Post, Khan said a bloodless deadlock in negotiations is infinitely better than a bloodshed on the battlefield. He also warned against regional spoilers who are not invested in peace and see instability in Afghanistan as advantageous for their own geopolitical ends. United Nations Special Envoy Martin Griffiths says Yemen's warring parties have agreed to exchange over 1,000 prisoners. The agreement was reached during UN-brokered peace talks in Switzerland. The government will release 681 Houthi fighters in exchange for 400 prisoners, including 15 Saudis and 4 Sudanese. Damascus has accused Washington of using sanctions to suffocate the Syrians like George Floyd, who was choked to death. Addressing the UN General Assembly, Syria's Deputy Prime Minister Walid al-Mualim said the inhumane curbs are impeding Syrians and their livelihoods. Washington maintains the measures aim to pressure Syria's President Bashar al-Assad into UN-led talks to end the 8-year-long conflict. India's coronavirus tally is approaching 6 million after registering nearly 89,000 new infections and more than 11,000 deaths overnight. In Pakistan, 6 people have died of the virus in the past 24 hours, taking the toll to 6,457 with over 310,000 infections. Globally, the virus has infected more than 32.8 million people and claimed over 994,000 lives. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We start from Armenia, which has imposed nationwide martial law and has announced a total militarization amid fresh row with Azerbaijan. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced the measures after an encounter with Azeri forces in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Armenia's defense ministry says its military downed 2 of Azerbaijan's helicopters and 3 drones in response to the attack. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan's army says there is no need for total military mobilization since its army is fully staffed. Earlier, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev vowed to avenge the killing of Azerbaijani soldiers. Aliyev accused Armenia of illegally settling in Azerbaijani territories, saying Baku will defend its lands. He said the Karabakh region belongs to Azerbaijan as it launched a military operation along the contact line between both countries. Meanwhile, Turkey called on Armenia to immediately cease hostility towards Azerbaijan. France has urged both sides to restart the dialogue process. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has warned against settling hasty timelines for the intra-Afghan talks and a hurried international withdrawal from Afghanistan. In his article published in the Washington Post, Khan said a bloodless deadlock in negotiations is infinitely better than a bloodshed on the battlefield. He also warned against regional spoilers who are not invested in peace and see instability in Afghanistan as advantageous for their own geopolitical ends. The Prime Minister said Pakistan will continue to support the Afghan people in their quest for a unified, independent and sovereign Afghanistan. He said Pakistan believes peace negotiations should not be conducted under coercion and urges all parties to reduce violence. Imran Khan urged the Taliban to recognize the progress Afghanistan has made, just as the Afghan government has recognized the Taliban as a political reality. 7 civilians have been killed and 10 others wounded in a car bomb explosion in Syria's northeastern Hasaka province. State media says the suspected militant attack occurred at the southern entrance of Ras al-Ain city. It said the blast rocked the industrial zone south of the city. Earlier, 2 civilians lost their lives in a similar incident in the northern Syria's town of Tal Halaf. Turkey's military conducted Operation Peace Spring in northeastern Syria last year to clear it from the PKK militants to secure its borders. Now, Damascus has accused Washington of using sanctions to suffocate the Syrians, just like George Floyd, who was choked to death. Addressing the United Nations General Assembly, Deputy Prime Minister Walid al-Muallim said ban on medication is wasting human lives amid the pandemic. Al-Muallim said the sanctions were directly obstructing access to basic necessities such as food, heating, gas and electricity. New U.S. sanctions imposed in June further crippled the war-torn country's crumbling economy by prohibiting foreign companies trading with Damascus. He criticized U.S. and Turkish troops' presence in the country, deeming it a violation of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Mr. President, the continued illegitimate presence of American and Turkish forces on Syrian soil meets all legal conditions of an occupation. The Syrian Arab Republic will spare no effort to end this occupation by all means possible under international law. The actions of these forces, taken directly or through their terrorists, secessionist militias, or manufactured and illegitimate entities, are null and void with no legal effect.
Washington maintains the curbs are aimed at pressurizing Syria's President Bashar al-Assad into UN-led talks to end the 8-year-long conflict. Now, UN Special Envoy Martin Griffith says Yemen's warring parties have agreed to exchange over 1,000 prisoners. The agreement was reached during UN-brokered peace talks in Switzerland. In a briefing, Griffith said the 2 warring sides must move forward with the release of prisoners. The government will release 681 Houthi fighters in exchange for 400 prisoners, including 15 Saudis and 4 Sudanese. Yemen has been mired in civil war since late 2014 when Houthi rebels forced President Abdul Rabbu Mansur Hadi's government out of the capital, Sana'a. Meanwhile, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says presence of the U.S. armed forces is detrimental to the regional security and stability. Rouhani said getting U.S. out of the region is the duty of all countries where its troops are present. In a meeting with Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein, Rouhani said Iran stands by the government and people of Iraq to promote unity and solidarity. He said Iran has always supported Iraqi people and its legitimate government by providing assistance during terror attacks from ISIS in the country. Hussein conveyed warm greetings of Iraqi President and Prime Minister to Rouhani and appreciated Iran for its assistance to the Iraqi people. Now moving to Israel, where thousands of people have staged a protest outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence in Jerusalem. They called for Netanyahu's resignation over allegations of corruption and his mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic. They held Israeli flags, blew horns and chanted slogans against Netanyahu. The Prime Minister was indicted on charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust earlier this year. Netanyahu has dismissed the demonstrators as anarchists and accused the local media of strengthening the protests by giving them heavy coverage. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, 2 soldiers have been killed after gunmen in a car opened fire at an army post in the Minyei region. In a statement, the military said a gunman was killed in the shootout while others managed to flee the scene. The Lebanese army has launched a manhunt for the attackers. This comes shortly after security forces killed members of a terrorist cell in the Wadi Khalid region. In recent years, Lebanon suffered a number of attacks by ISIS, which is still active in the border area with Syria. Moving on, the UN has condemned clashes between 2 armed groups in a residential suburb of Tripoli. In a statement, the UN support mission in Libya expressed concern over the fighting in the eastern suburb of Tajora. The mission said it reminds all parties of their obligation in accordance with international humanitarian law. The clashes broke out between two militias loyal to the UN-recognized Government of National Accord. Defense Minister Salahuddin Al-Namrouj has ordered the two groups to be disbanded as he threatened to use force. Tajora suffered damage after Eastern strongman Khalifa Haftar launched an offensive against Tripoli in April last year. Now, India's coronavirus tally has surpassed 6 million after registering more than 85,000 new infections and over 1,000 deaths overnight. Globally, the virus has infected more than 32.7 million people and claimed over 993,000 lives so far. The coronavirus cases in Colombia have surpassed 800,000 a day after deaths climbed above 25,000. Meanwhile, Australia's virus epicenter, Victoria, is accelerating to ease social distancing restrictions as infections slow to fewer than 20 cases a day. Victoria State Premier Daniel Andrews said that state reported 16 COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours.
We are ahead of schedule. We have made more progress than we had hoped to make at this point in time. Now, that is something that we can all be pleased about, but it doesn't mean this is over. Today we're going to take some safe and steady steps. It's not everything that Victorians would want, but it is what is safe at this point.
Meanwhile, South Korea has reported 95 new cases amid concern about the virus further spreading during the upcoming Chuseok holiday. Now, in Pakistan, 6 people have died overnight due to the COVID-19, taking the toll to 6,457. The Health Ministry reported 694 new infections since yesterday, raising the number of active cases to 8,205. The ministry said with a 95% recovery rate, over 295,000 patients have recovered from the disease. Sindh is still the most hit province with more than 135,000 infections, while over 99,000 cases have been reported in Punjab province so far. The National Command and Operations Centre said 735 hospitals are providing facilities to 924 patients admitted across the country. Pakistan Hindu Council Chief Dr. Ramesh Kumar has called for a transparent inquiry into the killing of 11 Pakistani Hindus in India's Jodhpur city. Details in this report.
Last month, 11 Pakistani Hindus, including children, were found dead under mysterious circumstances in the Indian state of Rajasthan. In a news conference in Islamabad, Dr. Ramesh Kumar called on India to share details of the case with Pakistan. The victim's family accuses India's ruling BJP and the extremist RSS of being behind the brutal murders. Srimati Mukhi, a lady from the ill-fated family, said India didn't even allow the relatives to see the dead bodies. Mukhi said she will not stop protesting until her family gets justice. Earlier, members of the Hindu community staged a protest outside the Indian High Commission in Islamabad to demand justice for the victims.
Pakistan's Defence Minister Pervez Khattak has witnessed multinational military exercises Kavkaz 2020 at Russia's southern city of Astrakhan. Khattak also met Pakistani and Chinese participants of the military exercises. Army's Chief of Logistics Staff, Lieutenant General Asar Saleh Abbasi, was also part of the Pakistan delegation. Delegates from various participating countries were present on the occasion. Earlier, Pakistan Army's media wing, the ISPR, said the exercise is aimed at assessing the ability of troops to react to various challenges. It said the exercises offer an opportunity for troops to learn from each other's experiences. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Moving on with the news stories. Police and anti-COVID-19 restrictions. Protesters have clashed in central London against coronavirus restrictions. The Metropolitan Police said the protest had to be stopped because the crowd was not complying with social distancing. London Mayor Sadiq Khan said the reckless and violent behaviour of some protesters has left hard-working police officers injured. Protest organised by campaign groups including Save Our Rights UK was called to mark 6 months since the passage of the Coronavirus Act. At least 3 protesters and 9 officers were injured, while 16 people were arrested. Earlier, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he is giving a 30% increase in funding for the World Health Organization. Addressing the UN General Assembly session virtually, Johnson said reforms must be made to the global health body.
And it is precisely because we know that no one is safe until everyone is safe that I can announce that the UK will contribute up to £571 million to COVAX, a new initiative designed to distribute a COVID vaccine across the world.
Moving on, Belarus has accused Western nations of attempting to sow chaos and anarchy in the country. Addressing the UN General Assembly, Belarusian Foreign Minister Vladimir Makai said interference in the country's internal affairs is harmful for everyone. Makai said there are attempts to destabilize the situation in the country. He said the concern for Belarusian well-being by Western nations has been brimming with cynicism. Earlier, French President Emmanuel Macron said President Alexander Lukashenko has to step down amid the protest. The US, UK and Canada have announced imposing sanctions on Lukashenko and his companions over allegations of rigging polls and assaulting the protesters. Moving on, North Korea has warned South Korea against violating its western maritime border. North Korean state media said Pyongyang will organize a search operation for the Seoul's officials' body itself and will hand it over if found. The state media said any intrusion into North's territory may lead to another awful incident. The warning comes after South Korean scouts went searching for the body of their official killed by Pyongyang earlier this week. Earlier, Seoul urged Pyongyang to conduct an unprecedented joint investigation into the incident to establish the facts. Pyongyang said it shot at the man intruding into the North's waters and burned the floating material carrying the man to contain the spread of COVID-19. Well, now, US President Donald Trump has nominated conservative judge Amy Coney Barrett as his Supreme Court pick to replace the deceased Ruth Bader. At a White House ceremony, Trump said Barrett is one of the country's most gifted legal minds with an unyielding loyalty to the Constitution. Trump said Barrett is a woman of unparalleled achievement, towering intellect and sterling credentials. He said the US Senate will likely to open hearings on Barrett's confirmation on October 12th. Barrett said she knows the road ahead will not be easy and vowed to discharge her judicial oath with humility and courage.
I would not assume that role for the sake of those in my own circle, and certainly not for my own sake. I would assume this role to serve you. I would discharge the judicial oath, which requires me to administer justice without respect to persons, do equal right to the poor and rich, and faithfully and impartially discharge my duties under the United States Constitution.
Well, if confirmed, Barrett will become the fifth woman ever to serve on the top judicial body while pushing its conservative majority to 6-3. Now, the remains of 117 Chinese soldiers killed in the 1950s Korean War have been returned to China. A repatriation ceremony was held at the Incheon International Airport west of South Korea's capital, Seoul. A Chinese Air Force plane transported the remains to the Shenyang Taoxian International Airport in China's northeastern Liaoning province. Escorted by two J-11B fighters, the plane was given a water salute at the airport. Many people attended a ceremony held at the airport to welcome back the killed soldiers. It is the seventh repatriation of the kind following a handover agreement signed by the two countries in 2014. Earlier, another ceremony to lay the remains into the coffins was held at a provisional morgue of the 17th Army Division of South Korea in Incheon. South Korea has returned the remains of 599 Chinese People's Volunteers since the 2014 agreement. Now, China has successfully launched two environmental monitoring satellites from the Taiyuan Launch Center. State media says a Long March 4B rocket carrying the satellites was launched into orbit from the northern Shaanxi province. It says the satellites will be used to monitor land and water resources and disasters. The launch center said it will also serve the industries of agriculture and forestry. Saudi Arabia plans to resume tourist visa as soon as early 2021 after months of suspension amid the strict measures to prevent the coronavirus spread. This report has details.
Tourism is a key pillar of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's ambitious reform strategy to wean the economy off oil. Kingdom's tourism minister Ahmed Al Khatib said the sector has been hit hard by COVID-19, especially aviation and hotels. But he said the focus on domestic tourism this summer has partially helped absorb the shock. In late February, the kingdom closed its borders to foreign Umrah pilgrims and to tourists from at least 25 countries. In March, it barred all travel in and out of the country. The Saudi summer campaign promoted 10 tourist destinations across the kingdom, from beaches and forests to mountain peaks and historic areas. It helped boost average occupancy ratio at hotels to 80%. Visitors spent their days feeding ducks by the lake or visiting the city's parks and coffee shops.
In Saudi Arabia, we have seen and noticed very strong summer. After the January to May lockup period, we launched the domestic tourism and the people loved it. We promoted 10 destinations, main cities, mountains, and the beautiful Red Sea. And we have noticed 30% growth year over year.
The kingdom wants tourism sector to contribute 10% of gross domestic product by 2030.
The World Tourism Day is being observed amid new travel protocols and restrictions forced by the COVID-19 pandemic. In its message on the day, the UN said tourism in every country of the world has been hit the hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic. But it said this World Tourism Day represents an opportunity to rethink the future of the tourism sector. The UN identified an urgent approach towards advancing global cooperation as the key to boosting recovery. In a tweet, Pakistan's President Arif Alvi highlighted the tourist attractions in Pakistan, inviting international tourists to the country. Alvi said Pakistan is a land of peace, beauty, hospitable people. Now, Donatella Versace went underwater for inspiration for the 2021 Spring-Summer collection, which was unveiled at a themed event in Milan. Details in this report.
The Italian fashion house Versace has released its brand new collection in a live-streamed show. Described as a utopian settlement on the seabed, there was aquatic blue lighting, sculptural sand relics, and a parade of bright, print-splashed and crystal starfish-encrusted clothes. The models walked on the sandy ramp through the ruins of fictional sunken city of Versaceopolis, a Greco-Roman Atlantis-like setting. Donatella was paying homage to her late brother Gianni and his starfish, coral and seashell motifs from the Tejaros de la Mar collection he designed for spring 1992. The aquatic theme proved thoroughly entertaining with a golden digital octopus named Churro. In a post-pandemic world, the Italian brand remained loyal to its own traditions, with the collection of dresses and high platforms bringing a powerful attitude that looks to the future with optimism and hope.
Now, let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.